What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to another episode here on Ben Builds with Joe. We are back on our 1/48 scale P-40B Warhawk by Airfix, and today we're going to go ahead and move forward on finishing off the cockpit. Last time we overcoated all the internal pieces with a very nice Vallejo interior green. I like it. It's kind of grown on me. I think the color is decent enough. But today we're going to go ahead and come back in there and do some detail painting for the instrument panels, all the side consoles, anything extra. We're going to paint that all up, and then we're going to install the decals. Now, Airfix gives you a nice little section of very common decals that we can use for placards and stencils on the inside of the cockpit. Though when I compare what they tell me to do here in the instructions to what we have in our references, there's a bit of a discrepancy. So what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to more follow the references than the decal instructions. Now, one of the things I do have here when we compare the plastic part with the reference photo, we notice that certain parts that the instructions tell us to paint black aren't actually black in the reference photos. So we're going to go ahead and follow the references as closely as possible. I'm going to go ahead and queue up a time lapse. We're going to start detail painting all the side consoles, instrument panels. We're going to airbrush and we're going to paint to get this thing looking a little bit sharper. Let's go ahead and do it, see what we can do. While all those parts dry, we're going to go ahead and move our attention over to the chair. And I did take some Vallejo aluminum and I went ahead and airbrushed the pilot seat. Now I just took a piece of Post-it note, cut a square out of it, put it together there, slipped it behind the seat and in front of the frame. Went ahead and airbrushed the entire seat, just that nice silver color. I like it. It looks pretty decent, but of course the seat is a little bit of a letdown. There should be a lot more detail in the seat. There just isn't. We're going to go ahead and save it for that. It could use a really nice set of seat belts though. Now, in the hopes of not wasting other paint, I did actually end up taking that same aluminum paint and painting up some struts, some of the wheel hubs, some of the landing gears, just to go ahead and make sure that I have all those ready for when we need them. Now, speaking of that aluminum paint, I also wanted to go ahead and add in some chips here on the bottom of the cockpit floor. To do that, I'm going to try something I've never done before, and that is taking a little bit of a sponge and almost like dry brushing, but stippling chips and marks there with that silver paint onto the floor of our cockpit. I'm not sure how this is going to look. I've never done this before, and I think I have a little bit too much paint here on my sponge. So I think the real secret to this is have very little paint on your sponge and just kind of go for a haphazard random appearance. That should be fine. We're going to make a few more passes and get this thing looking a little bit better. Now that we have most of the chips down, I don't really like how stark they are, so we're going to try to take a Q-tip here and we're going to just buff them out and blend them into the surrounding areas. It's not going to be perfect, to be honest, but I think for what we're doing with it and for how much you're actually going to be able to see when you look down into the cockpit, it's going to be fine. Now for the instrument panel itself, I've decided to go ahead and do some basic dry brushing. And all that's going to do is bring out all the surface detail here on the instrument panel. This is a really nice thing about this Airfix kit. There's a ton of detail. The instrument panel looks really nice. We have our side consoles that look beautiful. We have a lot of internal ribbing and whatnot. So this is a really nice kit with lots and lots of detail. So to really kind of bring that out, I'm just going to do a really quick dry brushing. And then I want to go ahead and turn my attention over to maybe doing a little bit more here on the side consoles. And finally, we got to figure out what to do with that decal. Again, the side consoles I want to go ahead and also give a real quick dry brush to. Nothing too fancy. Want to hit all the metal parts with a little bit of wear so it looks like it's been lived in. Now working back with the instrument panel, I'm going to go ahead and take that decal, and instead of just sticking down the decal on top of all the nice surface detail here, we're going to go ahead and hand punch each of the dial faces out of the decal and then apply them directly to the actual instrument panel itself. I think that would be a really nice way of not only minimizing any silvering or anything like that, but it'll give us an excuse to use our punches and also to make things look a little bit different. So let's go ahead and cue up a quick time lapse. We're going to push forward. We're going to get all of these decals hand punched, put them on there, take care of a couple other things here and there for decals, and we'll be right back, see how we do. Alright everybody, we are back, and I honestly think that these look pretty decent. I went ahead and took the liberty of overcoating all the parts with a nice gloss coat and stuck mostly with the references, and I added a few different placards here and there that aren't actually called out for in the instructions. For example, this one right here on top of the map case that I found in the references, I decided just to add it. Also, the front instrument panel has all the dials nicely decaled in, and then I overcoated everything with some Future to make sure that they're nice and protected. Again, I'm not exactly happy with the seat. I think there could be a lot more detail put into that seat, but for what it is, it's okay, but I think it needs some seat belts or something. The other side of the console wall here as well, we have our detail painted, we have our decal right there. I again kind of strayed a little bit from the decal and the placement guide and went more to the references, but I think overall it gives you a nice impression of what the P-40B cockpit would look like, especially the fact that I'm using the actual references. I think that's as accurate as I can possibly get it. And finally, the floor of the cockpit. Yeah, I could have done a little bit better there on the chips and the scuffs where the pilot's feet would normally be, but I think for right now, it's okay. One last thing I do want to go ahead and do here is I want to add some panel line accent by Tamiya. We're going to go ahead and just drop that into specific points around the details here on the cockpit floor, the sidewalls. All I'm doing is trying to add a little bit more surface depth, shifting in colors, just to kind of really pop all that extra detail. I'm also going to use the exact same technique here on the chair, and then once that's dry, I can go ahead and weather it a little bit more. But overall, the panel line accent wash really works well. It's got all that nice detail there, and the back of the seat just pops right out at you, gives you some depth, gives you some shadow. Beautiful stuff. I love it. Now let's go ahead and grab our matte varnish. We're going to apply a nice layer to all the internal parts. We're going to make sure that all of our panel line washes are protected, all of our chips are protected, and everything kind of gives a nice, flat, dull coat. Let's do it. Now to add a little bit of extra detail here onto the instrument panel, we're going to take some Future floor polish. I have a wooden toothpick and we're going to take a little drop of Future and place it on each of the dial faces. That's going to give it the impression of having a glass lens, and I think it's going to add a little bit of gloss to it where it needs to be, where everything else remains flat. After it's all done, you can see I like the look of it. It's got a nice matte finish, but also each of those dials are glossy and it looks like something is covering it. I think it's a neat effect, so I'm happy with it. We've also done a lot of work on the floor of the cockpit, on the sidewalls of the cockpit, and even on the chair. Even though I'm not a real big fan of the chair, I think it's going to look pretty neat when I get some seatbelts attached to it. I'm going to go ahead and order those online. They'll come in eventually. But for right now, I think we're in good position to go ahead and just leave these to dry, and we should be able to move forward. Now, if you did notice, I actually painted the rear headrest there for the pilot. I did that in a red-brown color. Now, I'm not sure exactly if people would agree with me, but most of the references that I saw tend to be a little bit closer to red-brown than black. Even though the instructions call out for a black color, I just felt better painting it red-brown. Like I had mentioned, I was looking through my references and I did find a couple of images that show that headrest, and it almost looks like it's a little bit more red-brown than it is black. I'm not sure if you would agree with me. It might just be the coloring of the photo, it might just be the actual film stock that they used. Could be all sorts of things. Maybe the sun is making it look like it's brown, but in reality it's actually black. I don't know, but whatever the case is, I kind of got the vibe that it's a bit more on the red-brown side of things, so that's why I decided to use Tamiya red-brown. It might be more of an artistic choice on my part, but I'm okay with that. But that's going to be it for today, guys. We've done a lot of work here on camera, and I'm ready to go ahead and let this cure, and then we can shift our attention back over to the G55. Next episode, I want to try to install all the parts and pieces into the fuselage, see what we can do on that, and hopefully everything goes together beautifully. But until next episode, everybody, you know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool. Make sure to stop on by Joe's channel, give him a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe in case you haven't. We'll see you back here next week for another episode of Ben Builds with Joe. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.